Ladies and gentlemen, tonight the world is staring at what many are calling an oil Armageddon. The war in West Asia has now struck the arteries of the global economy, oil and energy. Oil is now the battlefield. Energy is the weapon, and the global economy may be the collateral damage. In a dramatic escalation, Israel has reportedly carried out strikes on fuel depots and oil storage facilities in Iran, setting massive storage tanks ablaze and sending toxic smoke billowing across capital Tehran. But the retaliation was swift and strategic. Iran struck Bapco's largest oil refinery in Bahrain, one of Gulf's critical refining hubs. The conflict is no longer just military, it is economic warfare. Oil markets across the world have been rattled. Prices have surged past $100 a barrel. Analysts warn the spike could climb towards $120. In fact, that's just one part of it. Iran has gone on to warn that it could be well past $200 per barrel. We'll get to that. The war is now spreading across the energy map of West Asia. Drone attacks have targeted the massive LNG complex at Ras Laffan Industrial City in Qatar, the largest liquefied natural gas export facility in the world, which supplies roughly 20% of global energy exports. Drones have also been aimed at infrastructure links to Saudi Aramco in Saudi Arabia, shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow passage through which 1/5 of the world's oil flows, has slowed dramatically as tankers face drone attacks, missile threats and rising naval tensions. Energy giants across the Gulf are now invoking the rare legal clause of force majeure, effectively saying we cannot guarantee supply anymore. Kuwait has begun cutting crude production as tanker movements slow further. The UAE is adjusting offshore production because oil cannot simply be switched off like a tap. If tankers stop arriving and storage tanks fill up, producers face a dangerous dilemma: keep pumping and overflow, or shut the wells and risk permanent damage to oil fields. And all of this comes at a moment of dramatic political change in Tehran. Following the rise of Mojtaba Khamenei, son of Ali Khamenei, as Iran's new supreme leader, the region is entering an unpredictable new phase of power and confrontation. Those visuals on your screen of people flocking the heart of Iran, Tehran, showing their mass support for their newly selected supremo. Washington appears uneasy. For the first time since the conflict began, officials in the United States have reportedly expressed anger at the scale of Israel's strike on Iranian oil infrastructure. They have reportedly taken on Israel for the large-scale strikes on Iranian oil infrastructure, with a senior US official saying the attacks were not a good idea, and a very blunt message, often regarded as an explicitive, between the US while it was addressing the scale of operations with Israel. Iran has come out and threatened the West Asia and the Gulf countries that the strikes will continue if they can't rein in USA and Israel. Foreign Minister of Qatar has warned that prices could spike as high as $200 per barrel if the conflict escalates further. Even though President Donald Trump insists higher oil prices are a small price to pay for global security, but history tells a darker story. Let's just take you through the lessons that the world doesn't seem to have learned through earlier crises. The first major oil crisis was in 1973 oil crisis, when Arab members of OPEC imposed an oil embargo on the United States and several Western countries that were supporting Israel during the Yom Kippur War. The second major disruption came during 1979 oil crisis. This crisis began in 1979 when the Iranian Revolution caused oil production in Iran to collapse. Oil prices surged from roughly $15 per barrel in 1978 to around $39 by 1980. So prices increased more than 150%, triggering another global inflation shock. The third major disruption occurred during the Gulf War. This crisis began in August 1990 when Iraq invaded and suddenly took control of a large portion of the region's oil production, roughly 4 to 5 million barrels of oil per day supplied, effectively removed from the global markets, leaving oil prices more than doubling in a few months. Each of these crises show how sensitive the global economy is to disruptions in oil supply. Whenever geopolitical conflict interferes with energy production or transportation in West Asia, prices can move very quickly. Analysts are already warning that this could become most serious oil supply disruption. In other words, when Middle East, what we call as West Asia, stops giving out oil, or where oil stops flowing in West Asia, the global economies tremble. So are we seeing the weaponization of oil in a modern war? Could the Strait of Hormuz choke global energy supply? And if conflict spreads to Saudi Arabia, Iraq and the UAE, which in fact it has, could the world be heading into a new global inflation shock? I'm being joined at this point by Ujjwal Singh Bhatia, who's a former ambassador to WTO, as well as Shubhamoy Bhattacharjee, who's a consulting editor with the Business Standard. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining me. Well, first to you, Mr. Ujjwal Singh Bhatia. For a generation, this has been unseen, this has been unheard of, the way it is unfolding. The way the battle lines have very clearly shifted from war zones of military targets to the economic activity and the heartland of economic activity, the energy heartlands of countries. An entire generation has not seen something like this, but possibly you and generations earlier have seen something very close to this. Mr. Ujjwal Singh Bhatia, what are the big takeaways as we see energy heartlands being targeted at this point?
Well, Sneha, you spoke about the weaponization of oil. Unfortunately, this is not a new development. If I can take you back to much before you were born, in 1953, Prime Minister Mossadegh of Iran was dislodged by the US and Britain on his decision to nationalize Iranian oil. And after he was removed, the Pahlavi dynasty began, and the oil resources of Iran were given out to friendly Western companies. So this is not the first time. And the more we go, now we are into the second week of this present conflict. And it is obvious that the real issue is oil. Whether we like it or not, the entire conflict is based on the oil resources of Iran. Now, where does this go from here? I think the leitmotif of this campaign so far has been uncertainty. It would take a very brave or perhaps a very foolish mind to predict how this is going to end up. We have a decapitated Iranian leadership. We have a totally destroyed Iranian defense system. And we have fragmentation of the IRGC, which is now fragmented into several autonomous control centers. So there is no central command center guiding decisions by Iran as of now. Now, the question therefore arises, if you want an end to this conflict, who do you talk to? And at present, this is not clear at all. Now, you spoke about the attacks, the Israeli attacks on Iranian oil facilities. And I think this certainly is an escalation of the conflict. But there is possibly more to come. The Karg Island, which handles about 80% of Iranian oil exports, if that is targeted, then certainly we will see the fat in the fire. So as of now, great uncertainty. The last point I'd like to mention is about the pain points. Iran is obviously hurting. Its leadership has gone. The entire country is devastated. But still, the pain points for the United States and Israel are not very evident. And they will become evident when the effects of oil price increases get into gasoline's retail sales,
So
get into
let
grocery
me just
bills.
interrupt you because I do want to come in at this point. Let me just get in Shubhamoy Bhattacharjee just to take it further from where we are leaving it with Mr. Ujjwal Singh Bhatia. Mr. Bhattacharjee, to just what Mr. Bhatia is saying, it's very interesting of the reports that have emerged from US, the first reactions that US seem to have had when in conversation with Israel to the attacks. You know, the expletives that were used in the manner in which it used, and it's quite in lines with what we have Mr. Ujjwal Singh Bhatia saying, that the pain points for US is going to escalate as the oil crisis or the oil prices really soar. Where is this in context to what Iran is saying? That listen, if you do not rein in Israel or US, get ready for $200 per barrel. And put that in context for how US reacted with Israel today as the scale of the attack in Tehran became clear.
First of all, in oil issues, the first thing is follow the money. Don't follow the dialogue. The group of 7 ministers have just issued a statement. They were expected to release oil. They have not released the oil. They've instead said we will continue to closely monitor the situation and developments in the energy markets, etc., etc. What does that mean? The G7 also includes the USA. They do not see the crisis as something that they cannot handle or the world oil markets cannot handle. First of all, that. Secondly, what happens between Iran and USA is their political affair. Obviously, that is going to have a large impact. But who are the buyers of oil? The buyers of oil are India, USA, China, Korea, Japan. China is not in this war. India is not in this war. Japan, South Korea are also not in the war. The Gulf countries cannot not sell oil. Remember the big difference from 73, 79, 81, 91. All of these was the oil. Those countries had oil. They said we will not sell oil to punish USA. This time, their buyers are India, Japan, USA, India, China, and other countries whom they want to sell the oil. So the problem is one of supply shock, which these countries are as keen as the buyers to ensure that it gets settled. So for Iran to say that prices will go up to 200 is their way of basically making the oil traders push the US economy, the Indian, and others to come to a settlement, because that is their best bet. They have nothing else as their bargaining chip. Disrupt the oil economy and hope that that will create enough pressure for a sort of an armistice or whatever you call it, ceasefire. For India and others, the problem is that this price rise is a big one, but it's not the only place from where India buys. Remember, India's biggest seller of oil is Russia, is from Africa. There are Nigeria, Angola. There are big oil sellers, including even Venezuela. Now you might say, will they also be selling oil at $200? Well, if they are selling at $200, what is USA standing there for? USA will not allow the oil to be sold at $200.
But Shubhamoy, while you make that point, it's interesting because what you have said is true for oil, but that's not really the case for LNG and other energy sources.
LNG, just again, LNG comes from Qatar. Again, Qatar is not somebody. Qatar doesn't have any problem with India. It would want to sell to India. It says that it's just having a problem that right now, if it runs its facilities, those could catch fire, there could be destructions. And so they are also equally in the game of trying to ensure that the oil goes through.
True.
Saudi Arabia can't cap its oil, as you rightly said. If it caps the oil fields, there's going to be months and often years to restart those oil wells. So those oil wells. So Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, they want to get the oil out.
Right.
Now, obviously, if they are going to get the oil out, and India is one of the largest buyer, China is the largest buyer, India is the third largest buyer, then obviously India and China will not be buying oil at absurd prices. So those guys will have to ensure that the prices remain stable. It is up to Iran to keep on saying that, oh, like, come along, we have created enough disturbance and we are sure that it'll go up to rise up to 200. As I said, follow the money. Don't follow the verbiage. The verbiage
Interesting.
doesn't really mean much. Yeah.
Right. Ujjwal Singh Bhatia, if I can come back to you at this point, would you agree it's not about dialogue, it's about where the money trail really is at this point? Why do I ask you this question is, the way India is looking at this, India has gone on to say, listen, we are well in control. We have enough stocks. There's no reason to panic. You don't need to panic. We have enough buffer for the days that lies ahead. We are in control for this. There seems to be some changes in terms of how to book the LPG, the days that are there, LPG cylinders, the days that are there for 21 days that have been put in place right now. But how much of that would affect the long-term stocks and all is, something to be seen. Largely, India giving a message, this doesn't affect us at this point. But just to look at the kind of exports that India does, the kind of imports that India does, particularly with oil, where does this stand at this point with what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz?
I don't think we can be in denial, and I don't think that is the government's position. What the government is basically saying is that for the moment, for the present, we are in a position to manage this situation. And our macroeconomic fundamentals are good, our foreign exchange reserves are good, inflation is within control, everything else is within control. For the next few months, we can manage now. But the real question, as I said earlier, is the uncertainty. How long does this whole conflict continue? We don't know. The more it continues, I would say that we have entered into a phase of asymmetric war, because the Chinese the American pain threshold is much lower than the Iranian pain threshold. And going into midterms in the United States, if gasoline prices are up, grocery bills are high, inflation is up, the bond markets are in turmoil, you are going to see major political reactions in the United States. And I think that is what Iran is playing for.
Right. Closing remarks from you, Shubhamoy, at this point. When Tehran was attacked, the oil fields were attacked, one of the things that everybody was talking about was oilpocalypse. Are we looking at that? Is there a growing concern around how the markets are being shaped?
Look, oil markets are highly, what is called, responsive to whatever happens globally. So oil markets will respond. In the oil market, we should always remember that anybody who gives a comment on the oil market is either buying or selling oil, often in the futures market. And I'm saying this with a lot of sense of responsibility. So please, when we get commentaries on oil, remember, it's always good to check where is the person coming from. That is a very significant one, because when people don't make losses in the oil market, the traders, they make profits either which way, whether it goes down, whether it goes up. Now the futures market is looking high, and they were not making profits earlier. They had taken hammering last year or a year before. Now is the time to make profit. So it is a good time to therefore book profit. And it's therefore the time for people to look at what are the disruptions that will happen. There will be disruption. There'll be disruptions on the larger supply issues.
It's interesting that you're calling it disruptions, I mean, that's a very balanced and a nuanced word to use, not something that is often being used in discussions right now. Disruptions, possibly some may, even say it's underplaying it, but disruptions being being said with a great sense of responsibility, I would say.
No, I'm saying it because remember, 91, India was living practically on oil tankers coming into India. Like, from airport, directly we were taking into our refineries and pumping it into our bunks.
Right.
We are far removed from there. Today, Indian oil refineries process 245 million tons of oil. That's a capacity. And they feed only 120 into the Indian market. The rest gets exported.
Okay.
So if that turns into India, where is the huge challenge? There will be problems, but it's not that we are at the receiving end of a very major conflagration. US and Iran, obviously, they have opened it for themselves. And there's absolutely, as Mr. Ujjwal Singh Bhatia
And
is
Israel.
saying, we know all bets are off on which way the political game will go. And there's no way to judge that. And he would, I mean, that's something that's going to be a very major one. But
Right.
the oil economy is different.